here inside of Substance Painter, so we can start working on the textures now. So let me turn off shadow for now. Okay. Then let me just change the environment from the display settings to Mandarini. I prefer using that one most of the time. So now let's kind of isolate one of these to start working with. I'm just looking at the pokers now. I think I'm going to start texturing the pokers first. So let's kind of bring in our reference image that is on the side. I kind of added more reference images that I got online just to help with the metal texturing. So we're going to try to replicate something like this metal texturing on the pokers and the rings and pokers. We're going to replicate this particular texture in here. So let's kind of isolate that now. Let me put this by the side. And let me just check if everything's going correctly. I'll go to layers. Let me delete that. So we'll start with something. You can either start with materials or creating our own. Let's kind of create a few layers first. I'll create a few layers first and kind of bring in that our normal map on top of this. So I'll name this to normal. Okay. So from the properties here, I'll turn off color, metal, roughness, and height. And I'm going to plug in our rings and pokers normal map. So that's there. So I'll click on it. So that should kind of accentuate the details even more. Probably this feels a bit too intense, though I kind of like how it is now though, but with this gray shaded mode in scene here, it feels too intense though. Feels really intense. I might just have to take this down even more. So I'll go to the channels in here, up here, I'll click on this, I'll click on normal. So now I can actually change the opacity of that, the intensity of that rather. So I can change the intensity from here. So I'll just take this down. Somewhere around here should be fine. If you still need more of it, you can just go back and adjust that. So back to base colors. Now let's plug in a particular material. So let's look for something that looks close enough to the reference image we have up there. So I'm taking smart materials. So for the smart materials, let's look for a material that looks close to it. So let me just type in metal here. So that will filter out the search and give us only metal materials in here. So let's see what we have in here. This actually looks good. Let's see. This also, that one is too battered. Our model already looks battered enough. Yeah, this one kind of is kind of close to it. No, definitely not for this. Let me kind of scroll down and kind of see other maps we have in here. Okay, let's see this. Yeah, this kind of looks really, really close to what we can use as a base. This one is too battered. I don't want to use that one. We already have a battered mesh already from ZBrush. Let's check this out. Still gonna be this will do a better job. This will do a better job for us. Not really. This will do a better job for us. Let me just kind of apply this in here. So I'll give this a moment to load. So right off the bat, we already have something cool enough to work with. This for most people this might be the final work for this, but I believe each model or reference image tells a story of age and then longevity on that particular model that gives you a clear idea of what has happened to that model over time. So, like I said before initially, your model is supposed to tell a story. Both even when you're modeling them, even when you're sculpting it in ZBrush or when you're kind of texturing it instead of Substance Painter, it needs to tell this. It needs to tell a story. So what story now can this model actually tell us? So based on the reference image, which is already telling us a story, okay, let me just change this to 4K resolution so we can work at the best resolution possible in our viewports. So we can get things looking close enough to what a final render will look like. Okay, so We want this our model to kind of tell a story of age. So how can this model tell a story of age? Is by using reference images that already have that story in there and then replicate that story on our model. Just like this key reference image we have also that's telling a story of how it has been used over time. So giving us a clear idea of where it has been roughed out and then where the paint is kind of chipping off from it. So we're going to use that. We're going to use the same story from this key and kind of replicate that on our model also. Let me kind of get this around here. So you can see for the edge now, the edge of this key itself, the edge that actually goes into the key hold. Let me kind of get this like so. Here. You can see how this edge that goes into the keyhole most of the time is more faded out compared to the other parts of the body, because that part has been used over time more often than the other parts, and that particular part has touched other metal surface even more, so making it feel more faded out. So just hitting C on the keyboard, you can go to this albedo mode. So this is the albedo mode or base color mode. So unboxing or unfolding our smart material, let me check this out. So I'm going to click on that mask now. So this is the mask we're going to be adjusting for this. Let me see, I'm going to be using a different brush for this. So go to the brush menu. I'm going to be using, let me see, I'm going to be using depth brush for this. Depth brush always does a better job most of the time for us. So that should be fine. Let me just scale this down by using the close bracket key. So you can actually flip this up from white to black by hitting the hex key on the keyboard. That kind of switch this from black means you want to remove, like erase. White means you want to paint back, bring back. So it's not working now because we need to do something else. Yeah, that's the actual layer that we need. We need to do something else. So you can see now it's not. Let me change this to. It's still not working. So yeah, what we need to do is to kind of add a paint layer in here. So adding a paint layer in now, yeah, is working perfectly now. Okay. So now so now we're basically painting more of the reflection of the reflective material on top of this. Because in this region now tells a story that the frontal part has been used most often, because that's the part that's the part that's kind of used as a weapon to kind of injure or break stuff. So this poker part kind of so this poker the poker head kind of becoming more, it's becoming rather it will be getting more contact from other surfaces more often than the other part, because that's like the like weaponized part of the bat itself that's supposed to do most of the work of trying to of breaking or even cutting, no, not cutting through flesh though, but definitely making an hole inside an organic or tissue or flesh-like material. So or even metal material also. So we have to kind of make sure that part has more should be more faded out rather. That those frontal parts should be more faded out because that part comes more in contact with other objects. And that's the story I want to kind of tell on this particular on this particular model. Let me go in here. I want to kind of make this more. I want to make the reflection more rougher. So I'm just kind of adjust the roughness of this particular material. No, that's just too rough. Needs to kind of catch highlight also. Somewhere around here should be fine. Somewhere around there should be fine. Okay. So I'll just keep painting this all over the place. So I'm going to be doing this for the other. I'm going to be doing that for the other parts also. So I'll do this here also. You always want to work with references, and it's the realistic reference you have that will help you understand understand the story of that reference, then you can kind of replicate that story on your model also. Okay. So as you can see, I've gone around and then I've done that in the other parts also. So let's kind of check some other parts of the model and kind of see. You can see how it's eroded, more faded out on that hole on the key. So I'm going to kind of use that same idea and kind of even make this more reflective, kind of fade this out even more. Okay. So I'm just going to be doing this all over the place. Though not entirely all over the place though, because you don't want to go overboard on this and then to make it look weird or off. I'm always keeping the reference image by the side as a good guide to kind of give me a clear idea of what I'm supposed to do without going astray. So just keep painting on some of these edges. Okay. So you want to try not to go overboard. Always try as much as possible not to go overboard. And that's why you always need realistic references to work with most of the time, if not all the time. So I'm just gonna fade out this edge. Okay. If you're able to understand the story behind each material you're working with, at least the realistic reference material you're working with, if you're able to understand the story behind it, it gives you a clear idea of what you should do without having to go around in circles, making decisions that are not really necessary for the texturing of your model. Also, another issue a beginner might have will be kind of using your eye to kind of pick out the not necessarily the accurate color, but a close enough colors to kind of give you that realistic or similar effect with the reference image. But over time, you get good at it over time. Over time, you get better at it. And over time, once you kind of get used to analyzing various material and then kind of visually kind of break that material up in terms of color, variation, mid-tone, high tone, and probably even keeping in mind how old that particular material is to give you a clear idea on what to do when you start texturing that particular object in your texturing software of choice. So I'm basically repeating the same thing also all over the model, trying to make some part look more faded out. Okay. Now the reason why this looks good, this looks really good is because in ZBrush rather, we took our time to kind of create a lot of breakup details. So creating breakup details there kind of helps the curvature to kind of know where to apply believable rust or faded effects on your model. That's why it's always good to kind of get your ZBrush model looking as good or as close as the reference image before texturing them, because it really helps kind of speed up the workflow. Okay, so let me do this also in there. So I'm basically just going around and then doing this carefully, like variations of this, not too much though, but just putting variations in there. So just to break up the uniformity of the texture. Okay. And also another thing is that the more you take a break from the model, from your texture to shading process, and then you come back to it, the more you realize that there are other things to add that will make your model look more realistic. So you always want to be always so the idea is to be patient with the process. You don't want to rush the process and then kind of get carried away and then start doing things that are not necessarily important for that are not necessary for to create that realistic results. And that's why references are very important. References are very important, and then you have to condition your mind not to stray off the references too much. That even though you're straying off the references, it will be calculated decisions, and not just you wanting to try out every single tool in the software and see what they do. And then you begin to get a very, very, very noisy texture that does not that even though it looks realistic, it just feels too busy. You always want to try to avoid making your design look too busy. That kind of make the eye feel confused as to kind of taking its time to examine the empty space on your model that kind of makes the work look more appealing. So I'm basically still using the same brush to kind of lighten things up in some region and leaving gaps in between so it doesn't feel too what should I use now? It doesn't feel too uniform. Okay. Now this particular material looks darker, or like reference image that has more of a bluish tone in there. But even that bluish tone can also be from the color correction being done or photo retouching being done on the reference image. But I think this dark tone we're using in Substance Painter is still good enough to work with. It's still actually good enough to work with. Let me just repeat the same process for this top part also. Okay. You're not just painting things anywhere. Kind of painting things in a more calculative approach. Okay. Yeah, that should be fine. And you always want to keep in mind that even though you kind of worked on this for a few hours and then you kind of render this out and you feel you can still change things up, please just go back and then change things up. Since this is a non-destructive way of working, you can always make corrections to it as many times as you want until you're kind of satisfied with the results. Which in most cases, you won't be always satisfied with the result, but at least getting it to a very good place that you feel yes, even though I leave this like this still feels good. That would be like the general idea behind your BAB. That would be the general idea at the end of the day. Because even though we can't really replicate everything one to one with nature, and we can at least try to kind of get an approximation that looks good enough to deceive the eye, to make it feel, to make the eye think, yes, this actually looks real, even though it's not. Okay. Now, if this same process I'm doing, you might want to do that. You might decide to do that procedurally by using various maps inside of Substance Painter. That's cool. That will still actually work. But if you want to, I believe if you want to kind of enjoy the process even more, it's more preferable to go and paint it. So that it feels more like it feels more like you're the artist doing brush strokes on it. But it really doesn't matter though. just based on personal preference. If you want to go use procedural texture around this, yeah, that's completely fine. You can do that. You can do that if you want to. You can always do that. But hand painted always feels more. It always has this. It has this natural. It has this sense of. Is there any word like naturality to it? Can I just use the word? It has this sense of. It has a sense of nature to it. So using by painting this by hand like a true artist, even though we're using computer generated softwares, but okay, let me. I think there should be another detail we can add in here, more like some kind of probably something more like a rust effect, I guess. Let me just look for another reference image for this. I think this sort of reference image on the left hand side should be fine. You can see how this one also tells his own story. If I zoom in here, you can see how this particular model also tells its own story too. But it also has some rust around it too. So I want to try and create some rusting effect on top of mine also. So I'm going to be using though there's some default rust material in here though. There's some default rust material, but I can actually use that if I wanted to. But we can always create our own if you want to. Let's kind of create our own. So I create a new fill layer. And on this fill layer, I'm going to change the color to something more. Let me kind of physics see if I can find the color in here. Somewhere around here should be fine. Okay. And I can always modify this if I want to. This should obviously be metallic. Then the roughness, I kind of roughen this up a bit like so. Okay. So let me go back and base color for this. Now I'll just change the name to, let me just give it to rust. Now add a black marks to that. I can start by bringing in a smart marks rather. A smart marks that's close enough to giving me, it's close enough to giving me a result that is appealing enough to work with. Okay. So let me look for a particular one. I want something that kind of adds rust to the edge and on the body also. Let's kind of find a smart marks that will do both of that for us. Something like this fabric edge should be cool. This fabric edge looks cool. You can see how it applies to the crevices and then also on top of the body, which is kind of exactly what we want. Let me just drag this and drop this on that particular fill layer, on the rust fill layer. Then let me just give this a moment to load. It's actually trying to compute. So I think it's in there. It's in there now. But we need to kind of change up the material a bit more. It's actually there, but it's not too obvious. So if I hit C on the keyboard, you can see that it's there now, but it's not too obvious. So I need to kind of I might need to change the color tone of this. Okay, let me kind of adjust the maxing. Let's see if we can get this to be more broader and occupy more of the model itself. Okay, I think I'll change the color. The color looks too dark. Let me brighten this up a bit. Yeah, it's much brighter now. Now we can really see something in there. Okay, so go back to the max. Let's kind of adjust the max. Let's look for one of the options. So basically in Substance Painter, it's more or less like trial and error. You just playing with the settings until you're satisfied with how that looks, and then you can always keep that and or modify it later on. So that's basically what I'm going to do now. I'm going to try to look for the tool that kind of broaden out this marking on top of this even more. Let's see what that gives us. Yeah, this is it. This is actually the setting we need. Let me kind of adjust this and get this at a good value. Okay, this seems fine. This is our rose fill. This rose our rose fill to metallic though. You can always take down the metallic properties on the fill layer if you want to. But I'm guessing I might change the properties of that fill or the metallic nature of this fill layer later on. So I'm still making adjustment to this just to see what that gives me. And just find the right balance that I'll be happy with, and then just leave that and begin to work on it by hand. Okay. So now let me kind of roughen this up a bit more. Yeah, this feels even better. This feels even better. So just roughen that up a bit more. So you kind of fix that. Now the rust now is all over the place. It's all over the place. I don't want that. Let me just try and put this underneath this. Let's see. This is actually a good spot though. Let me turn this off, and it's not so obvious to see, but it's actually in there. It's actually there, not very obvious, but it's actually there. Let's see. Let's maybe we can keep this or not. Okay. It's actually there though. But the idea is that you can see the possibilities in here. There's so much possibilities in here that we can actually make or adjust in real time, non-destructively. So it gives you that, this sort of splinter gives you that freedom to kind of manipulate things however way you want. Like unlimitedly. So I'm going to, let's see. I probably just put this in a group and then add a mark to that group. Let me kind of blur this out. It should be a bit blurred out. Like so, something like so should be fine. Now to go out of this albedo mode, all you have to do is to hit M on the keyboard. So I'm going to group this. I'm going to group this. So Ctrl G to group that, and I'm going to add a black mask to that group so that will completely hide everything. Then now with the brush now on the white value, with our dead brush on, we can actually start painting. You can actually start painting things now where they should be. Like now we have more control over painting this where it should be. So I'm going to start painting this now. So I'm going to avoid painting where I have this grayish gray material, this gray colored material. That gray colored material is an indicator where the reflectivity is more shiny. So I want to actually paint where we have more of those darker spots. I'll be painting more on where we have most of those darker spots. And you can always control the intensity of the brush however way you want, or the opacity of the brush however way you want to kind of get your desired results. So I'm painting mostly on the black sides, on the black region. Okay. Now the intensity is not so obvious though. I might just need to change the intensity, opacity of the brush probably later on. But for now, let me just keep working on this just to have some more variations around this. Okay. Because based on the reference image, the rusting is happening, but the sharper reflectivity is still on top of that. So you want to kind of maintain that sharper reflectivity on top of everything and just put the rust under it in the darker spots. Let me kind of increase the stroke opacity now. Let me just try and start painting for this lower part. Okay, now I have more of that in here also. Let me just adjust the light by holding shift and then moving the mouse cursor to adjust the light. So that's fine. So we can keep working on this. Alright, so let's keep painting on this. Okay. Alright. So I'm basically avoiding those parts where we have that gray material. And I'm painting more on the darker material. Okay. Maybe even paint on some of this, just a very few region of this white or gray shaded region. Just a few, not too much. Okay. You can use different types of brush on this if you want to, but I think the depth brush does just fine for me. Okay. This is fine. What else can we add? I think you can add some scratches now. Maybe let's add some kind of scratches on top of this. So I create a new fill layer. You know what? Maybe let's use default materials in here. Let's use some default materials in here. Maybe for a rough metallic material in here. So let's look for one. Yeah, this will be fine. So I'll just drop this on top. That's fine. Okay. So I'm going to use a black, let me use a black mask for this. On that black mask, I'm going to be adding a fill layer for that. We're adding a fill layer on that black mask. So I'm going to know, I think I want to plug in a material in the map in there. So let me just look for a map. I want to look for the scratches map to plug in there. Let me start creating here. So I'll just delete this and type in scratches. Okay, let me use this one that has the darker shade to it. Because the scratches will be white and the darker part will be empty. So that'll be easy enough for us to manipulate. Let me turn this off. True. Oh, mistake. I need to turn off this previous fill layer I created. Let me delete that. So now if you go back to the material and invert that, let me change the light a bit more towards us, towards our direction. So I don't know if you hear better. I don't know if you can see the scratches now. You can see the lines in there. So let's create some height information here. Let's turn on height. Yeah, much better. You can see the height in there now. You can see the height information in there on the scratches. And the scratches are actually catching some reflection because they are on top of this. I'm using a metallic material for this. So let's see. What can we adjust in here? Normal intensity. I want to kind of take down the intensity of these scratches, of the depth of these scratches. So that doesn't seem to be doing much. Okay, let's change this from the channel up here. Change this to height. You can take down the, yeah, much better. You can take down the intensity now. And that looks fine. Though we have so many scratches on top of this. We don't want this to have to the scratch shouldn't be too much now. Shouldn't be that much. So let's kind of use another max to kind of max out another texture to kind of another procedural texture to kind of max out some of these scratches. So I'm going to add another fill layer on top of this. Then I'm going to be using, let's see, this one has more darker tone. So the darker tone kind of hide out some of the scratches. Then the whiter tone will reveal some of the scratches. So let's click on that. So we want to change the blend mode now to multiply. You can see it added a different look to our model, but we don't want that. Let's put this on multiply, okay. You can see how that will multiply now. It kind of maxed out, you see, it's kind of maxing out some of those excessive scratches on top of this. I think we're in a good spot now. I think we can stop here for now. If there's anything other thing what we're supposed to do on top of this, we're going to do that in the next lesson. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson. So bye for now.